We were culinary Jews. The core of my religious education was cheese blintzes and potato knishes and chicken noodle soup with matzo balls. Well, the temple was really the kitchen. That's where my mother presided as the grand rabbi, simmering and stewing and serving up sermons of stuffed cabbage and delicious foods for her congregants, her husband, and her children. I knew a little more about our religion than just what we ate. I knew how to bless the Sabbath candles. I knew the names of all the important holidays and what they stood for. But my parents didn't regularly go to the synagogue, or the Shul, as we would call it. That was reserved mainly for bar mitzvahs and weddings. And I think the reason that they didn't go was because neither of them knew how to read Hebrew, and that embarrassed them. I lived on East 29th Street in Brooklyn, in a brick row house, and our neighborhood was ethnically diverse. But a few years after we moved in there, the house next to us went for sale. And lo and behold, a Jewish family moved in next door. Up until then, we were the only Jews on the block. My mother used to insist that I get dressed up on Saturdays to show respect for my religion, even though we weren't going to the synagogue. And then she insisted I get dressed up on Sundays to show respect for my Christian neighbors. I was always dressed up. The only pair of jeans I had, which we called dungarees back then, were bought for my one summer at Camp Well-Met, a sleepaway Jewish camp in the Catskill Mountains. But eventually, another Jewish family moved in, coincidentally right next door. And even more coincidentally, they had a daughter, Linda. And she was just my age and in my grade. And we walked to school together and we played after school and we became very good friends. Now, Linda's family was even less religious than mine. But her mother shared my mother's mentality about dressing up to show respect. And so it came about the end of September one year. It was the middle of the week, and it was the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah. We were all dressed up and sitting on the stoop with nothing to do. We had coordinated our outfits. I had a black skirt and a white sweater, and I had a little red neckerchief tied around my neck. Linda had one too. We found them in a cardboard bargain box at the drugstore around the corner. And I had my very first pair of high heels. They weren't really high heels. They were about 1.5 inches regular heels, but that was higher than anything I ever wore, and so it qualified. I felt like the cat's meow. I went outside and I met Linda and we sat down on the stoop, and she was all dressed up in her outfit that matched mine, and she said, "What do people do on Rosh Hashanah?" I answered knowingly, "Go to Shul." "Well, where's the Shul?" she said. I thought about it. I knew where there was a Shul. It was a long walk, but I knew where it was. I had gone to a bar mitzvah there. We decided that we should go to Shul. Oh, it was a glorious, self-righteous decision. We got up and started walking. I felt so good. I was following in the footsteps of my ancestors. I was going to Shul on Rosh Hashanah. Of course, my new shoes were not the best thing for walking to Shul, but it was okay. We persevered, and finally, we got there. Now what? The street was empty. The synagogue covered a whole corner. It was a 3-story building of yellow brick. It had wide steps leading up to 2 austere wooden doors. We climbed the steps. The doors were closed. We leaned our ears against the wood. We could hear men's voices chanting inside, and the rabbi singing his prayers in mournful minor intervals. And as we stood there with our ears pressed against those great doors, a policeman came walking around the corner. He was all dressed in black. He was kind of portly. It looked like his arms didn't want to go all the way down to his sides, and he thrust his feet slightly sideways as he walked, like he was trying to get out of the way of his own thighs. He stopped when he saw us. "What are you girls doing up there?" We ran down the steps. "Oh, well, we came to go to Shul." "Are you Jewish?" "Mm-hmm." He looked up and down the street and he smiled at us. And as young as I was, not even understanding it, I knew there was something wrong with that smile. It wasn't warm and friendly. He came even closer till his face was almost near us, and he looked at us and said, "You know what those red neckerchiefs mean?" We didn't have the faintest idea they meant anything. He said, "Women wear them to let men know." "Know what?" Linda looked at me, I looked at her. He said, "To let them know that they are women of the night." Women of the night? What does that mean? Prostitutes. We knew that word. We had a pretty good idea of what that meant. The moment was intensely uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. Linda was a little bit more worldly than me. She grabbed my arm and she said, "We need to go home right now." We turned around and started walking. We must have gone 3 blocks without saying a word before I finally had the courage to stop and look over my shoulder and make sure we weren't followed. My shoes had become excruciating, but I didn't dare take them off and walk in my stocking feet because my mother had warned me those stockings have to last through 3 days of the Jewish holidays, so you have to take care of them. And to make matters worse, this was long before pantyhose had been invented. I was wearing a garter belt with long elastic straps that had already pinched off the little fine hairs off of my thighs. And I was working on growing a rash. We walked along in silence. "I never heard what he said." "I don't think it's true," Linda said. "I don't think it's true either." Nevertheless, as we walked, I found my hand going up to the knot of the neckerchief, and I slowly undid it and pulled it off. I crumpled it up and held it in my hand as if I was embarrassed to let anyone see what I had and what I had been wearing. We walked the rest of the way in silence. When I got home, I ran upstairs to my room. I took that neckerchief, I folded it up, and I put it way in the back of my dresser drawer. I never told my mother what happened that day. I was pretty sure that he was just having a good time with us at our expense. But just in case, I never wore that red neckerchief ever again.